Welcome to a new season, the season 11 of XTraw AI podcast series on AI and machine learning applications. This is your host, AI Raghu. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what the future of cryptocurrency transactions might look like when driven entirely by AI? Well, today we are diving deep into that very future with a fascinating topic, the on-chain agent economy. This emerging concept is transforming how AI agents can autonomously execute crypto transactions, paving the way for a new era of decentralized finance. Joining us today is someone who is leading the charge in this space, Sishir Varghese, the founder of Spectral Labs. Sishir has been pioneering AI-powered trading agents that are revolutionizing the crypto landscape, particularly with his platform, Syntax V2. You will find more information at the end of the podcast, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
All right, welcome to an interesting conversation today on on-chain agent economy and AI to AI crypto transactions. So today I have Mr. Sishir Varghese, the founder of Spectral Labs with me, and we will go into the concept of these on-chain agent economy and AI to AI crypto transactions. Welcome on board, Sishir. To get us started, maybe could you share us a bit of your background about how you picked up and how you got into this on-chain agent economy in the context of crypto transactions?
Yeah. So I've been active in the crypto space since around 2014. I first learned about it through two different friends, actually, one of which was doing a documentary on gaming in South Korea. And he actually learned about Bitcoin transactions that a lot of these gamers were using in the early 2010s. So he kind of came back there after doing documentary, told me about it. And actually, at the time, around like 2011, when he was telling me about it, it kind of just sounded like PayPal to me. It was like money transfer. It didn't actually fully click back then. One of those things, kind of the thought process is that, okay, like what problem is this necessarily solving? I didn't really kind of zoom out to think, where this was powerful. And so when Ethereum started to come about and people were talking about that on the internet, this idea of programmable money and just programmable smart contracts really resonated with me. And so another friend who actually shared that with me and who was also like mining Bitcoin on his laptop was really telling me about this. And that's when I first entered the market and started to actually become more active in the space. Actually around that timing was right before Mt. Gox had happened. And so the market had crashed back then. There was never a lot of like kind of noise or like chatter about it in the news back then. So it's quite quiet. But I had already kind of learned all the fundamentals of it. And so about a year or two later in 2016, became active again. And then in 2017, I started a venture fund to actually support a lot of the early stage founders and builders within the Web3 ecosystem. So that gave me a good chance just to kind of network and meet a lot of really smart people in the space, understand kind of really the power of like what this kind of underlying technology could bring. Really diverse set of like applications that it could bring to. And so I was operating that and investing in the space for a number of years when I really had this kind of itch to actually start building in the space and become like a founder and sit on the other side of the table. So around 2020, end of 2020, 21, really start to formulate ideas around different applications around the financial use cases of like Web3 and crypto. And, initially started building around this sector of an on-chain credit score and really this concept of like decentralized machine learning. And so to break up like what is generally seen as like central intermediaries controlling financial infrastructure and trying to figure out a way to build out a global network of them. So there was never kind of a single point of failure. And so as we were building out this machine learning network, as this network was kind of proliferating, we realized that like AI was starting to come about. And really that kind of like, when GPT-3 and OpenAI started to release, there was this kind of retail wave coming in. And for us, it was the kind of same kind of sector, same concept, same machine learning team that we had, but really changing from like ML to AI wasn't really a big shift for us in terms of product or the team itself. It was more just around like external like branding, I guess, and messaging. And so we continued on this path. And as these models, these underlying models became more powerful, we actually started to think a little bit farther ahead and realize that the underlying power of these models could actually build towards agentic interactions instead of us building these models internally in-house, trying to allow to do all these manual labor for users. We actually started to think a little bit more in the future and realize that a lot of these agentic and transactions could actually abstract away a lot of these like kind of UX clunkiness for existing Web3 users and for retail users that don't necessarily care about like private keys and signatures and permissions.
Right. Beautiful. I think amazing background and journey. I like the aspect that you've been following, and you're not only following, you've been investing, and you've been in this field since the 2010s. But initially, many of us thought that this was just like a fad, and I was following the space. But then later on, got glued into it. But amazing journey. So before I take a break and come back and really go into the nitty-gritty details and into the actual meat of our today's conversation, another question I have is, could you give a glimpse of, I know you briefly talked about it, but could you give a glimpse of what inspired to build your Spectral Labs and create a marketplace like what the syntax version 2 for AI-powered trading agents? Any quick thoughts about that at a high level?
Yeah. So maybe like this like high level vision of what we kind of aspire to be in the future is really this kind of environment where agents are actually transacting and interacting in the blockchain space on behalf of users. And so really one big mission we have in the long run is actually trying to ease this onboarding and UX, existing clunky UX of crypto and replacing it with agentic transactions and agentic interactions. And what I mean by that is that currently, a lot of users, there's a kind of a steep learning curve in the beginning of using crypto, downloading a wallet extension, understanding different chains, bridging, what are all these terminology of like staking and lending and swapping, what do all these things mean? Whereas this normal user, really just wants to start interacting and, really reap the benefits of what everybody is talking about, but actually getting to that stage is quite cumbersome. So most people don't necessarily care around, where their private key is, what his signature is this transaction I'm about to sign with all this code and that pop up, am I signing away all my funds? Is it safe? There's a lot of different things that the user is forced to kind of go through in this UX that they don't necessarily care about. Where in Web 2 and fintech has done a really good job of abstracting a lot of this away. You're never really understanding what Stripe does on the back end, intersecting a lot of these banking infrastructure and doing all this. You're never really thinking about where does Venmo payment go. I know the user is my friend's username, and I want to send him $10 or $100. And that's the extent of what most people care about. In crypto, you're actually forced into a lot of cumbersome UX. And so I think the power behind a lot of this and the incentive for us was really understanding that LLMs can actually take a lot of this kind of cumbersome UX away from the user and really kind of resonate back to that initial incentive or interest that the user has, which is actually just performing these functions, performing these transactions. And we're at this stage right now where the infrastructure is getting quite strong, but the UX is lagging. And so I do believe that this level of like what we call in this industry like intents, an intent is basically declaring what you want to do at the end state. And to get there, there's multiple steps, but actually we could actually go directly to that intent where an LLM can actually start to understand it. Once that starts to click for you, then we start to build this infrastructure to actually understand or teach the LLM different functions, different training and like RAG pipelines to actually give the user that level of abstraction that they initially want. And so that really sparked this idea of like what could actually capture that, and agents themselves. And maybe I'll just get into quickly just like a couple of sentences like what an agent is. For us, an agent, and even in the Web 2 world, it's essentially like a piece of software driven by an LLM, and that can perform different functions. In the Web 2 context, generally, it's a lot of times it's informational. So if this event happens, scrape this website, get this information, and then send me an email or send me a Slack message, right? A lot of informational transfers. In the Web 3 world, a lot of the product market fit and interactions that users have are very much financial. And so when you start to apply that same heuristic into the financial world, it ends up the end state being do a swap, buy, sell, stake here, buy this NFT, sell this asset, buy this token. It's very much financial use cases. And so when you declare an intent in the Web3 world, this piece of software that's driven by an LLM actually needs a wallet attached to it. And this is like where we come in, and our infrastructure is quite powerful. So we take this concept that is, very powerful and popular in Web2 world. We take that underlying infrastructure and the fundamentals of it, but apply it to a Web3 use case where this agent actually has access to its own private keys and its own wallet. And so when you declare an intent in the Web3 world, it understands all of the intents and the language and generates code for you, but it also actually performs a financial transaction. And so that's this additional piece of software that we add on in there. And so that's kind of like this very quick way of understanding how we're performing our understanding agents in the Web3 world. But that kind of concept and that fundamental really extrapolates across all of Web3, because everything you do in the Web3 world is an actual transaction, whether it's financial or not. It could just be signing a message, or it could be making a swap, could be doing a number of things.
Right. I think that's a great way of explaining it. And I believe you have highlighted the complete concept in a beautiful way. I remember listening to some of these podcast conversations where Mark Cuban was talking about this, about how once you can make it available or ease the way how a normal user can interact with these crypto transactions, it makes much more easier sense and much more easier for the people to interact. And I believe you guys are getting into that space, or you guys are in that space where Spectral Labs is kind of trying to define this and make it easier for the end users to interact. Beautiful. We'll get into some of those details and about this on-chain economy and the creator economy. Let's take a quick break. All right, welcome back. So let's now, Sishir, let's now go a bit into the details of this on-chain agent economy. Before getting there, yeah, I know we've heard a lot about AI's role in financial markets. The concept of AI to AI crypto transaction is also quite new. So how do you define this? I know you briefly touched base on that, but how do you define AI to AI crypto transactions, and why do you believe this is a significant innovation in the overall crypto space in Web3?
Yeah, it's a good question. So how we define like an AI to like crypto transaction is essentially allowing this, the AI part is obviously an LLM, right? And so what can this LLM do on behalf of a user? And so if a user has an intent or declares something that they want to do, manually they would be doing like a number of steps depending on what that actual action is. And not only just a number of steps, but actually like transferring assets back and forth across chains, setting signatures, understanding a lot of these like kind of complex tasks that you may not understand, but you may want to participate in this kind of financial ecosystem without actually fully understanding all the steps. And I think a lot of what we're trying to do here with this like AI to Web3 crossover or intersection is actually not have the user even try to even understand or do any of these things manually. And so creating some optimization in terms of the process is really important for us. And so in terms of the transactional space, users should be able to actually participate in a number of different chains, a number of different protocols, different end states through initial like natural language intent. And so what I mean by that is quite literally saying things that are like usually that are set aside for institutional financial institutions or hedge funds that have a lot of infrastructure and strong teams. A user could actually just write in our platform things like, if the RSI is above this level, the MACD is at this level, any other trading indicator you want. Plus, you can say things like, okay, this wallet, which belongs to Vitalik, monitor its wallet. If it sells this asset, also sell mine, right? So a lot of what I'm kind of alluding to is that these transactions generally, firstly, take a lot of manual labor. They also take tons of like research and understanding that a user may not actually have time to do. And by the time they actually get to the end of that research or like deep insight, then the trade may be outdated. And so this efficiency or optimization we really want to bring is actually like almost leveling up this human, where hedge funds and institutions probably have this already automated in their infrastructure, or have like users 24/7 monitoring these markets and information data sources. A regular user may not actually have these types of resources at their fingertips, but this is kind of like what the tool that we want to bring to them. And so quite literally writing in natural language what they want to do, having the AI or the LLM translate that intent into code, and then generating a script for that user is quite literally like what we're building here. That's the first stage of it. And so this next phase of like what could happen, which is really cool, is actually giving that agent and that piece of software and the LLM reasoning capabilities. And so this first phase of this like agentic spectrum from like full on like autonomous to like function calling, we're starting incrementally by allowing the users to translate those intents and natural language into code itself. So it creates the code for you, but it's still calling kind of an if this, then that flow. The next phase of this, what we're working towards, is actually quite like autonomous agents. And the first phase is autonomous, meaning that the script is there, it runs in the background, but autonomous in the nature of reasoning. And so reasoning could be something like, make me as much money in the next 24 hours. Super vague. But now you've given kind of an open-ended resource or open-ended kind of like blank check to this user and said, here's $1,000 in this wallet. Make me as much money in the next 24 hours. Now the agent actually goes off and does a bunch of research, checks like Twitter sentiment, checks wallets, understands other protocols, liquidity, etc., and then starts to devise its own strategies. And this strategy could be we're making a lot of money, or it could just say, hey, I have enough money. I want to minimize my losses. I actually don't care about the upside, just make sure I don't lose money. So the ideas around this open-ended reasoning is really when it gets really powerful, which we're starting to experiment with. So we start off with this concept where there's this autonomous function calling, generating this code from natural language. That's like the abstraction of this UX. Then giving this agent like power in terms of like running 24/7 and being able to like summarize large swaths of data in an efficient way, where maybe a user would have to read like thousands of tweets from like projects and follow every random person to understand, is the market bullish on this? Is the market bearish on this? Whereas an agent or an LLM could actually understand that altogether. Or it could be another example if, let's say, the SEC puts out, a 100-page memo, a 1,000-page memo, whatever it is. Let's say a couple months ago when the Ethereum ETF was approved, a user would, try to figure out line by line what's happening. And LLM could read the entire thing, tell the user, okay, the ETH ETF was approved. Then you could set up a kind of function calling trigger, where the trigger is like understanding all the data that came in. The action is actually performing a swap to buy ETH. And so really what I'm trying to kind of get at here is like there's a ton of like efficiency that could be brought on behalf of the user just from these automated processes. And then also there's this concept of just abstracting away a lot of this manual labor.
Right. So before I get into my other question about Coinbase and other recent announcement, I have one question here about you talked about working with these different LLM agents, and also obviously Spectral Labs. I think you should be able to easily configure and work with a wide number of other LLMs out there. Or are you also working on an LLM yourself, or?
So we initially did build our own LLM. We trained an open source like coding model called DeepSeek, and we actually took millions of smart contracts, fine-tuned and built like proprietary RAG pipelines. We actually end up taking like auditing reports, documentation from a lot of top projects, and trained this model. It was really good at generating Solidity code, but as these newer models started coming out, to be honest, it just wasn't any point of trying to keep up with them with these kind of like billion-dollar companies, right? And they actually became just as good, and they'll eventually just get better. And so now we're using actually just state-of-the-art models. So right now we are using 4.0 and 0.1. We've experimented with Claude. This is kind of the state going forward. There's no point of like a startup trying to compete with these like companies.
I perfectly agree with that, and I think there's a lot I think people could reuse from there. And of course, your focus is on the on-agent economy and how you can create this. So I know we all heard about the Coinbase recently announced about their first AI to AI crypto transaction, right? I think which has caught a lot of attention out there. Could you explain your Spectral Labs approach to AI agents? How it is different from Coinbase and others who are in this space. Because I think this is where people could be able to correlate or see how Spectral Labs is different from Coinbase.
Yeah, we're really, I would say, focusing on like an end-to-end experience for the retail user. This is very much going to be like a consumer app, similar to how kind of ChatGPT is a consumer app. And so if you've ever used GPTs on ChatGPT, if you like click on the left and explore GPTs, these are very much like almost pre-built agents, essentially, for different use cases. So there may be like a data analysis agent, a PDF analysis agent, or talk like your Shakespeare agent, things like that, right? That's exactly what we're building, except for different financial use cases and kind of multi-step automations in Web3. And so what you would see in this kind of on-chain agent economy is very similar to like a GPT Explorer, but it's all these different agents that users have built to do different things in Web3. And so you could build an agent for a lot of these examples I give, like monitor the SEC API, copy trade Vitalik's wallet. There will be different agents for that. The same way in GPT and Web2, there's different agents for random like use cases there. And so, this could come in a lot of different ways, right? So it could be earlier what I talked about in terms of just abstracting like UX away. Or it could be actual like financial trading strategies, which are quite complex, and it could be all bundled into a single agent. And then you as a creator could actually allow users to use that agent in that same strategy. And so this agent economy is really around this idea of making the creation of these agents super easy. And then allowing other users who may not have that same level of knowledge to create these agents to actually be able to use them in the marketplace.
Okay, got it. So this takes me to the next question about your platform allows users to this collective ownership of AI agents, right? So what does that mean? Can you elaborate on how this overall marketplace works and what makes it unique in the landscape of crypto and AI? So, about this collective ownership of an AI agent.
Yeah, so this is actually, so right now what we're launching next month is the actual like agent marketplace, what that means is there's an agent builder. A user can actually create their own agents in natural language. So a lot of the examples I gave, you literally just type out a natural language, the agent builder understands it, generates the code, and then puts it into the marketplace. So any other user in the community can actually use it. So a really simple process there. The idea around collective ownership that you were referring to is actually part of when we migrate a lot of this directly on chain onto a blockchain itself. And so I'll get into a little bit of detail here, where right now our backend operates as like a operator node, or like what we're calling an executioner node. This backend takes the user request, checks what that agent is supposed to do, the instructions, like the data sources, like what the step-by-step process of the agent is, and actually executes that transaction and that kind of data listening, et cetera, all of those things for that user. So we are, in this sense, kind of like a centralized intermediary in this process. When we migrate on chain, the actual flow is actually where an agent builder does the same thing, creates that agent in natural language. And then when that agent is created, it's actually a smart contract itself on chain. So in that smart contract, in the metadata, it actually has all of the information, what the agent is supposed to do, what APIs it needs to listen to, what actions it's supposed to take. It also has like a registry, like an agent name service, which is very similar to ENS, Ethereum name service, but it's specifically built for agents that we're building. And then that lives actually as a actual smart contract on chain, the agent itself. So in that agent contract, there's also emitted ERC20 tokens that are representative of that agent contract. So agent ABC, when I create agent ABC, I can actually stipulate how many tokens are also minted attached to that contract. So those tokens that are emitted are actually freely tradable on like Uniswap, any DEX out there. So you could actually compare this to any other ERC20 from a project or any meme coin, etc. Those tokens are freely tradable, and you actually own a piece of that project or meme coin, for example. In this context, it's an autonomous agent that actually has tokens representing it. So buying and selling these tokens on the market, you're actually buying governance rights, you're buying staking rights for that token, for that agent. And let's say an example is like, let's say some market maker or some famous trader in crypto has deployed an agent, and it's a really like complex trading strategy that's going to bring in a lot of revenue. You could actually take these tokens, buy them on the market, and then stake them to receive a cut of that revenue from that agent by staking them. And so this agent contract, because it has all this information around what the strategy is, what the trading strategy is, what it's supposed to do, you could actually even build like financial models and actually speculate on what this agent is. So then it becomes all these agent contracts and agent tokens almost become this secondary economy where each of them are almost seen as like miniature companies. And they're open source, they're autonomous, there's no humans behind it. And then there's also governance attached to these tokens. So there's this entire kind of secondary effects of like what this economy allows to do. Plus, these humans that are interacting and buying and selling have an opportunity to actually have like collective ownership of each of these kind of mini companies or essentially autonomous agents.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think the concept itself is beautiful, and the way, of course, we did do a lot of reading in the past, and I think there's a lot of this going on. But I think implementing this and making it happen is really great. I think I really appreciate the efforts Spectral Labs is putting in this. Of course, you will be there might be some challenges as well while you're building this, right? I think you might have encountered a lot of challenges in building an ecosystem like this with AI agents managing their user wallets and executing the trading strategies and all these and autonomously. What do you think some of these major challenges are, and how you are encountered, what you have encountered, and how you are trying to address them?
Yeah, I think so I would say in the kind of agentic sector across Web 2 and Web 3, the idea of reliability and consistency is really, really hard. It's a difficult problem. And that's especially problematic when you kind of juxtapose it against crypto, which is a very deterministic environment. You know that this transaction is going through thousands or maybe like, thousands of miners around the world are actually all confirming this transaction for you. And you're signing it, with cryptography, and it's confirmed. In the LLM and the AI world, it's largely probabilistic.
Right.
And so there's this duality that exists, right? And so agents
Right.
coming from a probabilistic environment, clashing with this deterministic environment of these kind of transactions that it wants to execute, it's very difficult. And so the problem or the difficulty or the challenge really is, how far or kind of near do we want to fall on this spectrum of probabilistic to deterministic? How much kind of power do you want to give this agent to actually run these things for you without actually knowing like what the end state is? That's very probabilistic. You're letting the agent really figure it out. Or how deterministic do you want to make it without actually giving the agent or the LLM too much power or capabilities or oversight? Then it becomes almost too predictable. And so finding this sweet spot, and we're going back and forth or allowing the user to do that, is really one of the biggest challenges. And so, what we try to do is through this kind of agent building process, we allow the user to like declare their intents. And we generate the code based off of like a proprietary framework that we built called like listen, evaluate, and act. And so what it does, it actually takes the intents and the natural language text that the user has inputted and converts it into three categories. So the listen category is actually, what does this agent or a piece of software need to listen to? What data sources do I need to listen to? An example, maybe I'll start with like a simple example is if the sentiment of Ethereum is positive on Twitter, and the price of Ethereum is below 3,000, buy $100 of Ethereum. So now listen section would be, I need an API to listen to sentiment on Twitter. I also need a price feed to understand if the price is below 3,000, right? And so now that's a listen. Evaluate is actually evaluating those listening fields. So I'm evaluating, once I have this API to listen to Twitter sentiment, is it positive, is it negative? Right. The next one is the price. I have the price feed for the price of Ethereum, but is it above or below 3,000? So now let's say all of those triggers have hit, or the evaluation has passed. Now the last step is act. So taking an action. Once these triggers hit in the evaluate section, act, I need a function to actually buy Ethereum or do nothing. So it goes through these steps. And the important part of like kind of building this framework is because of this like initial point I was making around unpredictability or inconsistency of agents. So what we try to do is actually try to build in a very structured output and very structured framework for the agent to try to break this down into different components and follow this process. So, I mean, once you do this, it does become relatively predictable. There's still a lot of kind of problems around like code generation and things like that that'll just continue to happen depending on the level of the complexity of the agent. So this is quite predictable in its kind of structure. What we really want to get to is, beyond that, is allowing the LLM to actually build all these steps itself and the agent to actually understand a very vague intent, make some money, don't lose money, whatever it is, right? And then the agent actually builds all these steps itself. But this is part of this process where as models get better, as our framework gets more consistent and reliable, then we want to actually allow for this kind of more open-ended reasoning. And the reason we're doing this is, again, because it's such a financial use case, you really need to like build trust with the user. The moment that user or something goes wrong with the agent or it doesn't act as expected, which can definitely happen in a probabilistic environment, then trust from that user becomes very difficult to build back up again. So we try to take this iterative, progressive approach.
Right, right. I think, yeah, thanks for laying that out completely and and building the framework and then explaining these three different steps: listen, evaluate, and act, which is rightfully, I think, we are trying to build the trust of the users, creating this agent economy. So this takes me to the question about how do you ensure the security and reliability of these agents, and when you're dealing directly with the access to the financial assets of the users. So I know you have rightfully mentioned about the word trust and how you have to gain trust, but how do you maintain this security and reliability? I know you briefly highlighted those aspects, but do you want to elaborate a bit more on?
Yeah, definitely. I think on the code generation side, it's what we just discussed around like listen, evaluate, and act. But the actual kind of like wallet management, wallet service, I can get into that a little bit here as well. So as a user, generally Web3 users will have, a MetaMask wallet, Rappi wallet, Coinbase wallet, etc. So you log into our platform with your what's called an EOA, externally owned account, which is like a MetaMask, Coinbase, Rappi wallet. When you log into the platform, you generate what's called an agent wallet. And so that agent wallet and your personal wallet are actually linked as a one of two multi-sig, meaning that you can deposit and withdraw into this multi-sig. And also there is what's called like an account abstraction account generated for you as well. So that agent wallet, what you could look at it like is like almost like a trading account. When you have like a centralized exchange, you deposit assets into that trading account, then you go and run all these like operations with it, trade with it, etc. Similarly here, whatever assets you deposit into that agent wallet is the funds that the agent has access to. And so when you perform a transaction, it uses those funds and makes a trade on your behalf autonomously because that agent wallet has access to its own private keys. And so we don't have any access to those private keys. We use a service called Turnkey, which is actually like an MPC that allows us to take the built-up generated code for that specific agent. So a user has requested to do this, generates code. We take that payload and that code, and we send it off to Turnkey. Turnkey's MPC network signs the API, sends back that transaction signature for that wallet, and then that transaction like proliferates or propagates. So we are never actually in custody of any of those assets. We are like never in between any of the steps. It's the user has 100% non-custodial access for those assets in that agent wallet. And then it becomes still a very decentralized, non-custodial kind of interaction. So it's interesting because the agent wallet itself is not controlled by us. But in the same way, because it has access to its own private keys, it can run autonomous transactions on behalf of the user. And so a lot of those transactions are cool because it's the same things that a human could do, but at a very like autonomous agentic level.
Right. Could you share an example of a use case where your on-chain agents, AI agents, have demonstrated a significant advantage over traditional human or even non-robo advisors? We don't need to talk about the specifics of the company name or the public, maybe we can talk about public information or particular use case that you elaborate with that.
So some examples, one I gave earlier, and I can give another one as well. Like I think a good one is around anywhere where there's like large like swaths of data that a human has to analyze. And I think like the SEC one was a decent example where, I would say anytime you usually see these like price movements, maybe like CPI data comes in, or like some approval from the SEC comes in, or maybe there was even like some like injunction or like some punishment that the SEC is handing out. So these memos are released like through an API. A user would have to manually just read and understand and then try to make a trade in time. But a lot of these things are quite automated in the institutional world. So actually a regular user could actually just write into our platform, listen to the AdGuard SEC API, analyze the memos, and see if there's some sort of transaction I can make from it. You could be way more specific about it, like buy ETH, sell ETH, based off of analyze this PDF, analyze this SEC memo, and then make an action off of there. In that sense, where you have large swaths of data, this becomes like an extremely efficient like tool for humans to use, where you would actually probably get left behind because those price movements happen almost instantaneously. The same way here, a human can actually take any data source, whether it's like Twitter data, wallet data, like blockchain data, any API data, you could do that in a much more optimized, efficient way. And then in general, you could actually start to use trading indicators. And so I would say a lot of people, at least in the Web3 world, a lot of traders tend to try to use a lot of these tools, but they may not actually understand like the nuances of using like moving averages versus Bollinger Bands, RSIs, MACDs, etc. And it's okay. No, you don't really need to. In the same way, you actually don't need to do it here. You could actually have an LLM and the agent monitor these indicators for you and actually even give you suggestions around how to use them together, right? And so you set up a strategy where, you know, something breaks out of a Bollinger Band or it hits the bottom of it, plus the RSIs at that level and the moving averages hit here. And you could take those kinds of automations and actually pair them with actual like on-chain transactions. So you could say if this wallet of 0xABC has bought this asset or sold this asset, plus, you know, sentiment is at this level, plus this indicator is at that, make this action, make this trade. So to do that manually is quite cumbersome. Like you would have to actually do a lot of manual analysis. You'd actually have to look at charts and candle patterns. You'd have to look at indicators. You'd have to read a lot of different like data sources and then finally make that execution of that transaction. Here in this sense, you're actually just describing what you want to do, letting the agent actually do a lot of the analysis and the execution itself if those triggers hit.
Right. Beautiful. And thanks for explaining the complete process and with the help of an example. So I would like to now veer into this question about, I know you guys are fostering a new AI creator economy where creators are building and monetizing AI trading strategies. But how do you incentivize creators to build high value AI agents and how do the users benefit from this ecosystem? So what is the incentivization mechanism that you're creating for the creators to expand or into this economy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so our monetization and incentive model is based around building useful agents for the market. Well, what that means is, as a creator, if I build or deploy an agent to the marketplace, our transaction fees are based off of every user making a transaction with an agent. So it's very similar to like, you know, MetaMask or Uniswap, where we charge like a tiny transaction fee on top of every transaction. That transaction fee is shared with the creator of each agent. So as a creator, the more users I have transacting with my agent, the more kind of regular fees I get. It's very much like a creator economy in that sense, where it's similar to like even just YouTube videos, for example. Right. Every viewer I get or every click I get on this ad, it's the same exact model. What we're trying to incentivize here for is not the creation of just like frivolous agents flooding the marketplace, but building actual use cases and strategies and agents that actual users like want to use. And they put their money on the line, and then you receive kind of a share of that revenue.
Beautiful. So before I go into the most interesting question of our podcast, I would like to ask you one other question about how do you see these, I know this agentic workflows, role of AI agents in the enterprise world taking place in a big way, and all these consumer companies, consumer software companies, enterprise companies, and many industries are building this. And now you folks are also building this into the crypto space. How do you see this evolving in the next 5 to 7 years? Any thoughts about that? I know you might have put a lot of thought into
that. Yeah. So it could evolve in a lot of different ways. I think our kind of underlying mission is to really like proliferate the creation of these agents, which is like why we're really focusing on making the creation of them really easy, right? So I think we'll consider this whole process successful once, not if, I think when, the number of agents that are transacting on chain outnumber the number of humans. And so, you know, in order to get there at the creation of these agents, they also need the capabilities in this toolbox that they need to actually do things that the market demands. And so there needs to be use cases for these agents to do something that the user wants them to do. And so once we release, kind of reach over this cusp of like outnumbering humans, throughout this process, I think what we'll see is this like evolution of capabilities of these agents. So starting, as I mentioned, with like function calling agents, opening that up to like open-ended reasoning. And then hopefully, at the end of this, there's actual like autonomous agents, pieces of software that are running on a blockchain where a human is not in any control. And they have some sort of like concept of like reasoning, what they understand, what their end state or goal is supposed to be. And they actually just autonomously transact and build out what they want to do. And so this is where like when we migrate on chain and building out, and one thing I actually left out earlier, actually I want to just kind of add here is that once we migrate all these things on chain, as I mentioned, we are the like single executioner node that is processing these transactions. When we migrate on chain, we're actually modularizing and open sourcing this backend so anybody can become their own executioner node. And so what that means is very similar to like how miners process transactions on a blockchain, these executioner nodes actually will be processing agent transactions. And so while we are the only one doing that now, we want to make this like a global network of almost quote unquote miners processing transactions. So when a user request comes into that smart contract of an agent, any miner or node can process it on behalf of that agent for that user. And so this is powerful in this like current kind of question you had now, because at this end state of when these agents are actually kind of like living autonomously, you shouldn't have to rely on a single source of like execution backend, right? Now there's this global mining network of nodes processing these things. And so there's a lot of like, there were a lot of like ideas around like, oh, blockchains are like living organisms. They're like, they're running autonomously, et cetera. Same thing here. I think once these agents are kind of like living autonomously and they have open-ended reasoning capabilities and access to tools, then it becomes like this really powerful paradigm shift of having, there's this autonomous economy living there. Humans are just kind of like funding it and things like that. And then, a lot of different things become interesting.
Beautiful. I think, thanks for putting that across. I think beautiful way of envisioning how things are getting there. So now I come to this interesting question, or I call this the $1 million or the $1 billion question. I know this competition eventually is going to be there. How do you yourself differentiate from the competition, or or be a bit more specific? What sets your marketplace syntax version 2 apart from other platforms offering these automated trading strategies? Do you want to kind of talk about it a bit?
Yeah.
In one
So I
line or
think
one sentence or something like that is unique about
it. So I think automated trading strategies have been around forever. I think the democratization of access to them is still not there actually, like even now, like until we can put out like what we are building, which is coming out soon, next month actually. But that democratization of access to automated trading strategies and this like kind of customizable code generation is really, really powerful in terms of what we're building. Like users quite literally can just type in conversation like what they want to build, and it actually builds it for you. So that is like the first differentiation that like we're really focusing on. And the reason for that is like this is very much like retail access to really powerful things that were almost never accessible to like regular people. And so I think that differentiation is where we want to start. And again, it's the same thing you said around Mark Cuban saying people should get access, this kind of abstraction of UX that we're trying to build, and the simplification of this process. We want to really kind of hone in and focus on that to start with before like users can have these kind of, before we kind of migrate everything on chain, before agents are self-reasoning, we really want to tap into this end user and actually make like a quite powerful like consumer product for actually building code generation and automated trading strategies.
Beautiful. I learned a lot in this conversation with you. I believe hopefully my audience learned a lot as well. Before we end this conversation, I know I would love to have another conversation with you on a similar topic, but I think before we close this conversation, any key takeaways or highlights or insights where our audience can learn more or about this topic, or about if they can reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say, I always tell people just like use the products, not ours. I'm talking about like just using like Web3 products. I think understanding like the underlying benefits and capabilities of what the current state is already like extremely powerful just from like even a few years ago. And so it may not be like kind of like a takeaway, but more like a suggestion. I think, too many people, I would say, like maybe read or monitor or spectate. But I think actually like using products really opens up like the power and kind of like really puts you over that edge or throws you into that rabbit hole. And I think it's also important, at least in our context for Spectral, is to like even understand like the differentiation of like what we're able to do and like leveling up around all these things of like what the current state is. And so, I would highly encourage people to like next month use our product as well, give us feedback. We're also looking for like creators of agents. And so happy to like help early users, like almost quite literally handhold them, get on calls, talk to them, explain what are the new capabilities. If they have some trading strategy that they currently do manually that we could actually make easier for them, we'd be really happy to chat with them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for your time, Sishir. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sishir, for sharing your incredible insights with us today. It's been fascinating to learn about the groundbreaking work happening at Spectral Labs and how the on-chain agent economy is transforming the future of crypto transactions. Your perspective on AI to AI interactions in the financial space opens up so many possibilities for what's to come. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in into this very exciting episode of XTraw AI. I learned a lot during this conversation. I hope we hope you found today's conversation as insightful and as inspiring as we did. There is so much more ahead, so stay glued to the podcast for more deep dives into the world of AI, where we will continue to explore the cutting edge innovations shaping industries and the future of business. As always, I'll be tagging Mr. Sishir Varghese on the LinkedIn post. So if you have any further questions, you can directly reach out to Sishir, or alternatively, you can reach out to me, Raghu Banda, on my LinkedIn, and I can put you in touch with Mr. Sishir. Alternatively, you can also reach out to my other social media handles, RK Banda on Twitter, X, or Threads. You can also visit our website, xtrawai.com, xtrawai.com, where you can find humongous amount of other interesting episodes in the realm of AI. And if you haven't already done, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. We have got more fascinating guests and conversations lined up just for you. Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Happy predicting the future with AI technologies. Until next time, this is Raghu Banda, your host, signing off, and see you on the next episode of XTraw.